Thanks for doing this so late.
Yeah, that's
We
okay.
we normally don't get the opportunity to actually interview anybody this late unless they're local.
Yeah.
But thanks again for doing this. I know we've been. How long has it been? It's been
Almost a
a
year since we've
yeah.
been stalking her for almost a year.
So I've kind of already hit record, Sarah. We kind of
Okay.
just go with it when we're interviewing somebody. So let me just start here and say welcome. Uh, I'd love to introduce Sarah Kuhn, who is a very talented author. She's just a nerd like us, which is even better.
Mhm.
She wrote a book last year that caught my eye because of my daughters not having something to look forward to. Sometimes it feels like there's not a lot of superhero stuff for girls, but they're not that age yet. They're kind of 1 in 5, but I'm still
Mm.
looking for stuff for them. So that book was called Heroine Complex. It had like all the trifecta for me. It was about a teenager girl. She was a superhero and she was Asian. It had like the trifecta for me.
She's actually in her 20s.
Oh well, I meant like for when my daughter can read it.
Yes. Well, have you read it?
Yeah, we both have, but it's been a while.
Yeah, it has a bit of adult content, so I like to make sure people know that going in.
She's heard me curse plenty of times, so
Okay.
she's well prepared for your book.
Okay, okay. Just making sure. I've had some people ask me about that and then decide not to share it with their children, so I just like to make sure people know that.
Well, I'm not going to share now,
Yeah,
but
no,
You
it's up to you to decide when
you
you want to
could
make
read
that
it out
video.
loud. You could read it and just leave out the curse words. Just that means dang it. You
well,
know.
they've actually caught me watching The Walking Dead a few times, and I just
Oh
kind of just
no.
Oh.
I'm kind of caught up in the scene, so I kind of just let it play out. I remember, I remember my daughter pointing at the screen when she was only 2. She's 5 now, and she looked at one of the zombies, and like the zombie, of course, was like all fucked up, and she's like, she points at the screen and says, "Owie!" I'm like, all right, I got to turn the shit off.
That's a big owie.
Yeah, kind of a big one.
I read the book also, and I really enjoyed it. I'm actually looking
Thanks.
forward to the next book, of course, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I just wanted to get into it and talk a little bit about Heroine Complex. And what were your inspirations for Avita and Evie?
It's actually Aveda and Evie.
Avita and
Just
Evie, of course.
yeah, it's okay. Sometimes it's Evie,
Avita,
it's Evelyn, so sometimes people think it's Evie, but it's Evie.
Evie,
And it's Aveda, like the hair care
the hair
products.
care product. Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess like there were a few things. One was just I grew up on comic books, especially like Marvel X-Men comic books,
Mm,
and lots of superhero stuff. And also, I really love Hong Kong action movies, and so there's a little bit of that in
nice.
there too. Um, and I'm a spoiler alert Asian, and
No.
I just I felt like there's not a lot growing up that didn't like that really centered especially women of color in those roles.
Hmm.
So I always felt a little bit to the side. And also I like writing about female friendships, complicated female friendships. I feel like that's something that is becoming more popular, I guess, but certainly when I started writing it was not foregrounded as much.
Hmm.
And so I just wanted to write about, these two girls who have a really long, complicated friendship that they need to work on and how they sort of go about doing that.
It had a very like you're probably sick of hearing this, but it had a very like Devil Wears Prada like
Yes,
kind of
yes.
thing to it, which I picked up on right away. But I like that. So yeah, they're pretty. I mean, they're pretty unconventional, superheroes. At least they're. Was there an origin story in there? Because I'm trying to remember now. Like I remember them looking at a movie poster of some kind
Hmm.
and them talking about how they love that they finally had some representation. So it was almost like representation within the representation. Like,
Yeah.
so I thought that was really cool. So we talked a little bit about cursing earlier on. So was
Mhm.
that a very conscious effort? Like, was that to make it more realistic, or did you have
Um,
like how
no,
what?
that's just how I talk.
I fucking love it. I love that.
I wrote this novella that was the first sort of fiction that got me a little bit of attention. It was called One Con Glory. It's like a
Mm,
rom-com set at a comic book convention. There are no superpowers. It's just it's in the real world. It's what we call contemporary.
nice.
But I swore a lot in that, and so much so that people actually kind of have commented on it, and I actually tried to dial it back a little bit in this book, just because I don't want it to seem like it's an affectation or something. But
Hmm.
to be honest, that's just how me and a lot of my friends talk. So
Well, that's what I kind of, when I was reading that, I was like, this feels like if me and my friends were just hanging out, or it
yeah.
feels like what I would be thinking in my head or something like that.
Yeah, it's I
So I,
guess trying for a little bit of realism. I also have been I was a journalist for a long time and I worked in a lot of newsrooms, and those are just amazing
mm.
pits of profanity. So that I guess some of it came from that.
Oh, wow. Um, so one of the things I wanted to talk about, there really isn't obviously a lot of Asian superheroes out there.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of what other, like, I'm trying to really think hard right now. What other type of Asian superheroes are there out there? Like, I know there's bad guys. There's like the Mandarin, for Iron Man. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of representation out there. And one of the things that Vic and I have been talking about quite a bit is well, recently, Iron Fist came out and all that stuff, and the huge controversy over that,
Hmm.
how they kind of missed, it was a big missed opportunity to make that character Asian, and they should have.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've watched that show or not yet.
No, I
It's it
haven't.
is it is beyond ridiculous. I mean, the
Yeah.
guy can't even do kung fu. Okay, so One Con Glory. You might as well talk about that. So that's set in. Have you done a lot of cons like Comic
Oh
Con
yeah.
or
Well,
WonderCon?
first, did
Okay.
you want me to talk about some of the Asian superheroes that exist, or
Yes,
okay?
yes, you got the. Okay,
Because
please.
they do exist. There just aren't as many of them, especially when I was a kid. So
Okay.
like obviously there's Jubilee, who I've
Mm.
written about a lot, and I have a weird relationship with Jubilee because I was happy she was there, but I also felt like she wasn't necessarily like the personality I connected to when I was younger. She's very cheerful and perky, and I wasn't really like that. So it's sort of this weird thing where, like, sometimes when you have limited representation, it's hard because you feel like you should be grateful, but at the same time, maybe it doesn't totally represent you. And now, of course, I love Jubilee. I think she's like one of my favorite characters. But there's also well, Psylocke is the whole thing, which I don't think I think is too like crazy to get into. But I recommend a podcast called Explain the X-Men, which explains the complications of Psylocke in great detail. Um,
Was she in the last X-Men
Yes,
Apocalypse movie? Okay,
she
Olivia
was played
Munn.
by Olivia Munn. Basically, her origin story is very convoluted, but basically, the end result of Psylocke is she is actually a white British woman in the body of a
Oh.
Japanese ninja. So there's like
Oh.
a lot going on there.
That sounds like Ghost in the Shell.
It's like a reverse Ghost in the Shell if you've
Right.
seen the movie,
I
because
have.
there's some stuff going on there. But yeah, so that's a little bit complicated. And then actually Colleen Wing,
Oh, yes.
who is in Iron Fist, much to my dismay, and played by Jessica Henwick, who I love,
Yes.
is in canon mixed race, and I'm mixed race Asian. So that was like that character meant a lot to me, and I'm really sad that she's stuck on that show. Um,
Yeah, me too. Because Vic and I have talked to that extensively. Like, she was so awesome, I think, in
yeah.
the first half of that movie. Then, as soon as they slept together, spoilers, she became just a normal female character like you see all the time, and that really bugged us. It didn't
Yeah, she's
represent.
great.
Yeah,
She should get
yeah.
more to do, but and then there was Cassandra Cain, who was a Batgirl um, years back, and I'm actually not sure what the status of Cassandra Cain is now, but she was always a character I really dug. So those are some characters sort of in the Marvel DC verse, and then in the book, the poster you referenced is a poster for a movie called The Heroic Trio, and that actually is
Yes,
the real movie. It's a Hong Kong action movie from, I believe, the 90s. And it stars Michelle Yeoh, Anita Mui, and
love her.
Maggie Chung. So it's
Mm.
sort of like these three powerhouses of Hong Kong cinema. And I saw that movie when I was in college. I didn't know until then that it existed, and it actually sort of blew my mind because it's like it's three Asian women being superheroes, and there's really never any question about whether they should be doing it. The men in their lives are very ancillary,
Oh wow.
and it's just kind of about them, and it's really great. So I put that in the book because it certainly gave me a lot of inspiration, and I thought it would give the characters a lot of inspiration as children.
I love that part because for me it felt like so the characters within the book are influenced by that.
Yeah.
You're influenced by that. The
Hmm.
people hopefully that are reading the book are being influenced. I mean it's all very I don't know, reciprocal, a lot of synergy going on there, whatever you all these fancy words.
Hmm.
But I just really dug that about that part.
Good.
That kind of stuck out in my mind.
As you know, Sarah, this is our special podcast championing women in media. We're going to call it Chew on This Embraces Our Feminine Side. We already had Amy on here. We have one other lined up. And what I'd like to dive into right now is some of the things that might or might not have gone on in your past growing up um, that dealt with nerd or geek culture, and you basically had to take a step back and say, holy shit, I can't believe this person actually said that to me, or I can't believe that this actually just took place.
Well, I think going back a little bit, we're talking a little bit about conventions and fandom and things like that. And I've been a geek pretty much my whole life. But I would say that space has not always been super welcoming. Certainly, when I was kind of starting to get out and go to conventions and seeing the bigger world of geekdom, I definitely felt like a lot of the men there needed me to prove my authenticity. Um, and certainly did that to like a lot of women who were in that space. And it's always struck me as a little bit, it's just odd because there seems to be this assumption, and I feel like I'll talk about this in a minute. I feel like it's getting better, but I feel like there's this assumption that women apparently didn't grow up liking the same things that guys did. There was no way any of us could have liked Ghostbusters or Star Wars, even though those were like the biggest movies of their time periods, and also kind of endured. So I don't understand why no one think like people think that women don't like that stuff or didn't have the same like passionate connection to it that men did. So it's been kind of an interesting, I guess, battle of sorts. I feel like we've seen a lot of change, especially in the last few years. I mean, I think it was I want to say 2010. I was on a panel at Comic Con in San Diego that was called "Geek Girls Exist," and when I got asked to be on that panel, I was like, is that really, is that like a thing we still have to prove? Like, I feel like that's pretty obvious. But
What do you think I'm doing here?
yeah, it's just, but then like there was a sign outside the panel room that had the title Geek Girls Exist, and someone wrote in marker, like under it, you lie. Like they're like, no,
Oh
that's not
man,
true.
yeah.
But I feel like I don't know. From there, I felt like, I don't know if it was, that panel and my mindset that kind of started to change things, but that panel was packed. The audience was, I would say, mostly women, who just were dying to see that there were other, that we were all coming together as women in fandom. And I think, obviously the internet's changed a lot of things. I feel like Twitter is kind of the place where I found other geek girls, other girls who grew up being the only girl in the comic book store. I think that's actually how Amy and I met on Twitter.
Yeah, I was going to
Um,
ask you. That's how I kind of like met her, and then I like kind of put her name together because I saw her name in your book.
yeah, yeah.
So I reached out to her. Yeah.
She and I, yeah, we became really good friends. And I actually don't even remember the first time we met. I think it was just through those sort of geek girl circles on Twitter. And I feel like that has allowed us to come together and sort of be a force and sort of be like, you know what, we don't have to prove anything to anyone. We can just hang out and have fun together. And if guys like want to hang out with us too, that's fine. But I certainly don't feel like I need anyone's approval anymore to be in that space. If I ever did, I mean, I feel like before, I was just getting that vibe so much that I had to prove myself. And now, if I get it at all, I'm like, well, I don't care because I've probably been here longer than you have. I probably know more about the X-Men than you have. I wrote a superhero book and I wrote a romantic comedy set at a comic book convention. So I really don't feel like I have to prove my cred anymore. And if you want to believe it, you can. And if you don't, then that is sad for you.
Yeah, you've definitely got the nerd cred.
Well,
That's for
and
damn sure.
I feel like even if you do, like, even if you're like just getting into it, and this is one of the things that still like kind of just makes me crazy about the geek space is, even if you're just getting into it, like that should be encouraged. Like the excitement, the enthusiasm, whatever. You just read Harry Potter for the first time and you loved it and you want more of that and you want to meet people who like it as much as you. That should be encouraged. I don't understand why there's this thing where like some people in the community are so obsessed with keeping other people out of it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean,
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I think people I tell the story all the time because it shows the exact opposite of what people's reactions were when they were about not about having four women being Ghostbusters. We gave a contest. We had a contest, and a mother won it, gave it to her husband and her daughter to watch the movie, and immediately after Ghostbusters was finished, she turned to her father and said, "I want to watch
Oh,
the original one." A girl like she was what,
something
like
like
nine or
that.
ten
Yeah.
maybe. She would have never asked to watch. She would probably never even known about Ghostbusters until that movie
yeah,
came out. If it was never made with the four women, she would have never went to go
yeah,
see it. And now they've created a brand new
yeah,
fan.
Yeah. I mean, that's. I mean, it's kind of like the same. I know we talked about Zootopia. We talked about a lot of different things where they're getting the message. They're looking at that, going like, "Hey, I can be whatever I want to be."
yeah,
And I like that kind of message. I mean, it's universal, but I think those particular movies or books and things are kind of targeted for that.
yeah.
For
Well, I think it's the kind of thing where like, and I've talked about this a lot, especially with regards to Heroine Complex, but I feel
yeah,
like if you never see yourself centered in a narrative, you don't know that's possible. And you sort of don't know that it's even possible in real life in a way. Like you don't know that you can actually like be the star of your own story or your own
yes,
life or whatever. And I'm glad that we're getting to a place where we do have a lot of women centered in those properties, and it's not weird. Like it's not even a question. It's just sort of something that is.
I think the worst thing a writer or director ever does when it comes to trying to give an excuse for not doing it, like correctly portraying the race or whatever it's supposed to be, like a Ghost in the Shell. Their excuses are always not thinking it's just about just race. It's more than that. It's the culture behind it.
Yeah.
One of the things, I didn't go see the movie. BJ went to go see Ghost in the Shell, but one of the things that bothered me the most finding out about it was that there was a whole Japanese background to it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they decided to turn her white. And I was like, you just wrote that in to turn her white, but her mother and or whoever and her don't act like they're Japanese. And there was an article I read today about it.
Oh, is it the
Or
THR roundtable?
yes, with the four
That
women.
was like all my friends.
No way,
Oh
really?
my gosh.
Keiko Gena, Atsuko Okaska, and Tracy Katokiriyama are they're all like forces in the Asian American arts community up here,
Very,
and
very,
they're
very
good
intelligent.
friends of mine. And Rebecca Sun, who put the roundtable together, she and I recorded another podcast, which I'm not sure if I can say what it is yet, but we saw the movie and also talked about it.
Oh, I can't wait to
So,
listen to that.
but yeah, it was super interesting because it was like, I don't know, like one thing, and we talked about this a lot on the podcast, but like one thing that I always talk about is, this idea, like I know where it's coming from and I know it's like well-meaning, but I hate it when people say that characters just happen to be something, like this character is just happens to be Asian, or this character
Ugh.
just happens to be whatever. And I understand the intent behind that is to say this story is maybe not all about that. It's not a suffering story about, fighting racism or whatever. And certainly the stories that I try to tell are not all about being Asian.
Mhm.
But I don't ever write a character that just happens to be something, because I feel like whatever identity you are, it informs all of your experience in small and large ways. And to ignore that is to write a bad character. And I felt like in Ghost in the Shell, they had no understanding of that. They didn't understand that, like, if I suddenly woke up in Scarlett Johansson's body, well, first of all, I would try to do all the athletic things I can't do in my body. But I would also be very, like, there are certain ways that I would be really traumatized, and there are a lot of implications about that, and there are a lot of things that I think a woman of color would feel like waking up in that body, or or figuring out that that's who they used to be, like they do in the movie. And they were so unaware of that. They didn't understand that there was no,
Sh-
like, that the consciousness in the body could have been anyone. It didn't have to be a Japanese woman. There was no like specificity there, except that they cast a Japanese actress as her mother. And
Mm.
as the ladies talked about in the roundtable, didn't like, had them hug, and it was like, oh, that's not really a thing. Like,
Yes,
or
I was thinking right
there's
about that. Yeah.
yeah, there's a part where the Japanese mom like just invites like Scarlett Johansson into her apartment, and we're like, no, I don't think that would happen. Like, that's super weird.
I looked at IMDb. I don't think a single Japanese person was on the production, like writing or directing, or someone sitting there going like, "This is not what would happen. Like, why are we doing this?" Like
Yeah,
it was
it's
ridiculous.
very weird, and I don't like. Well, I don't know. Obviously, there were a lot of bad decisions made in
Yeah.
that movie, but yeah. So I have seen it, and we talked a lot about that.
That's so funny that was the article. I did not know that you knew those women.
Yeah, well, it's funny because like I'm like, oh, the stereotype is that like all Asian people know each other, and I'm like, no, but
Oh,
I
I
do
actually
know,
do.
I do, like, there are three of them in the round table. Or four of them in the round table. I'm like, I know three out of four of them, and I know the woman who put it together.
Well,
Oh my
not
gosh.
all Asians know each other because I didn't know you knew them. So,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I guess a lot of Asians in LA know each other.
Oh my gosh.
so speaking of like going on along with this whole controversy thing, and I believe you said you were Japanese American, right?
Yeah, I'm Hapa. I'm half Japanese, and then the other half is like German, English, mutt.
Okay, and
Nice.
so I feel your exact pain it's probably a good thing I was never invited to a roundtable like that because I probably would have cursed a lot like we did in our podcast, which by the way, you can curse on this podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, and as much as
Yeah.
you want.
Somehow our interviews always stay clean, though. I don't know why, even though we tell them that.
Maybe people are just like watching themselves a little
Oh, that could be
bit.
it.
Possibly, yeah. Very
So
possible.
for Ghost in the Shell, your views on it, because you're Japanese, I'm Chinese, so like there are certain things I would not even have known about that culture. When I was reading the article about the hugging, I didn't even think
Yeah,
about that because I'm not
yeah,
Japanese, right? I'm Asian, but I'm not
yeah,
Japanese. So even that
yeah,
kind of a difference makes a big
yeah,
deal. There's other things that happened in the past year. Of course, the Iron Fist, which we
yeah.
said was a missed opportunity until we saw the actual show, and it's more than a missed opportunity. It's like I don't even understand what you were trying to do.
It's a piece of
It,
shit. It really
just
is.
on just on the
And
show
we had to.
alone, not the
Yeah.
controversy stuff. I watched it with just critic eyes, and it was terrible.
Well, I think that like that's an interesting thing to talk about too, because not to bring everything back to Ghost in the Shell, but we were talking about Ghost in the Shell. I think like sometimes there's this idea that it's like, okay, what is this property, or what is this piece of entertainment, like what is the quality of it apart from the whitewashing or the white savior complex or whatever the thing is that's sort of causing the controversy, right? Like what is the product like apart from that? How is the quality? And what I wish that people would get is that those two things are not separate. Like
Mm,
the fact that they didn't think about sort of who these characters were in Ghost in the Shell and how their identities inform their experience means that that's a bad story. Like they're bad characters. So the quality is goes hand in hand with that.
yeah.
And with something like Iron Fist, which I haven't seen yet, but I feel like we've seen so many white savior narratives at this point. It's like, how can that not be tired? So again, and also you're like, from what it sounds like, you're seeing sort of these characters around him, like Colleen Wing, who are clearly superior, like who are like better
Yeah,
fighters and like better at everything, and they're being sort of shunted to the side. And again, that's bad storytelling.
Hmm.
So I feel like a lot of times those issues are actually all tied up together. And what I sort of wish people would realize is that if you think about these things, you can actually tell a better story. You can tell a more human story. You can tell a story with characters who have better motivations, and you can tell a story we haven't seen 1,000 times before.
everything you just mentioned about all these things that writers should think about, that's essentially the issue with these type of movies that don't think about those
Mm.
things. Not so much Doctor Strange with the Ancient One. That was just straight whitewashing. And
I still haven't
oh,
seen
okay,
that. I can't deal with it. I'm like this I cannot deal with this movie. Yeah, I for the most part I try to avoid those things just because I know at this point that watching them will make me angry. But because for Ghost in the Shell, I had a special request and it was work related. And
Mm.
like I saw it on Sunday, like the movie was already tanking anyway, so I was like, all right, I'll go see this one thing and see how it is.
I just get upset when they say like we're updating it, right? But they don't. It's okay. So Ghost in the Shell, they updated it to make it that weird
Yeah.
situation, but in Iron Fist, they didn't update it.
Yeah. Well, and in Doctor Strange, like I thought, again, like the ladies in the Hollywood Roundtable, and I think Tracy Kato Kiriyama and Atsuko talked about this kind of at length. But this idea that like, well, if we kept the ancient one Asian, it would be a stereotype. It's like,
Ugh,
well, then write it so it's not a stereotype.
right.
Like that's actually what the problem is. It's not that an Asian character is like, an all-knowing mystic, or an Asian character knows martial arts. It's that it's written as a stereotype. Like you can have an Asian character who's good at martial arts who's not a stereotype, just don't write
Right,
them that
exactly.
way.
That's how the
right.
director tried to, like, after he came out and said like, yeah, I wish we didn't do that, because I think they changed their story like 3 times. Once the
Yeah,
first, I
yeah.
think it was we couldn't do it because Tibet and China have have beef. That was the first thing they said.
Yeah.
The second thing, I think it was that they wanted to change it into a woman. And then when he
Yeah.
finally came out and spoke, he said, I wish we hadn't done that, but every time I tried to write a strong Asian woman, it ended up being like a dragon lady. And I'm like, what?
Right.
Wait. So, and what was crazy to me was no article picked up on the fact that he just inherently just said something that he views like that is fucking racist as shit. That he views all
Yeah.
strong, smart, powerful Asian women as like a stereotype.
Yeah, that's what it goes back to. It's like if you can't, you're a writer, use your imagination. If you can't visualize this beyond the stereotype that you've seen all your life, then that's actually your fault. Like that's something you need
Yeah.
to work on.
And Tilda Swinton, like, if we watched the movie and we love Tilda Swinton, so it was really frustrating to
Yeah,
like, because she's really good, but then she opened her mouth later on,
I
and then it was
know.
like, God damn it,
Yeah,
like you fucked it up even
it's
worse.
frustrating for me, like with all these, because I love Emma Stone,
Right.
and now I feel sort of betrayed by Emma
Yeah.
Stone.
Oh
Just because she
yeah,
has
Aloha.
slightly squinty eyes, she's
Yeah,
fucking half Asian. The fuck is
It's
that?
just,
yeah.
I know,
That's Cameron Crowe too, but yeah, that's the
yeah,
both of them.
they
Yeah.
just, I don't know. Like again, there was like no thought put into that, but yeah, whenever like I know a lot of it is like the machine and the directing and the writing, but some of the actors, especially since they're always like pretty famous actors, I'm sort of like, okay, you really need to think about this. Like, you don't have to take that part.
Well, someone came out and said, they hired Scarlett to get butts in the seats, and yeah, look how that turned out.
I
It
know
did.
it
It's a
clearly
shitty movie.
did not
It could,
happen. I don't think there are
no.
stars that like I've talked a little bit about this too with different people, but I think that's such an outdated way of thinking too, because I don't think there is actually a movie star that opens movies anymore. Like it might give you a little bit of leverage as far as getting like initial investors if you're not going through a studio, or like foreign sales or whatever. But I can't think of like a movie star who hasn't had a disappointment in the last 3 to 5
Unless they were
years.
attached to a
Yeah.
Marvel
So
movie.
yeah, and then it's like it's not them opening it. I mean, Marvel movies have no problem casting white guys who aren't really known for anything, who are named Chris, um, and making stars out of them. And I think in the THR roundtable, I think it was Keiko Agena who made the point that like if you had cast an Asian or an Asian American actress in this role, you could have made her a star. Like
Absolutely.
that's how that
Right.
works.
But
Absolutely.
I think you're right though. It's funny that you bring that up because as you were saying that, I had just watched Commando before this podcast, and
Hmm.
that was back in the day. It didn't matter in the 80s and the 90s, early 90s, I think, to mid maybe, that it didn't matter what that person was in. They were gonna put butts in the seat. Like it didn't matter how stupid
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's next movie was going to be. You were going to go see that movie. And
Yeah,
you're
for
right. There's
sure.
nobody like that. Even a Chris Pratt movie. Like I love Chris Pratt, but I didn't go see Passengers.
Yeah, and a lot of like I love Chris Pratt too. I think a lot of his successes like recently are attached to giant
Yeah.
franchises, like
Hmm.
things that already have the name that they don't necessarily need. Like a star helps, but they don't necessarily need a star to sell like Jurassic Park to you.
Or Tom Cruise in The Mummy.
Yeah.
Oh shit! Don't get me started on that. I was like, oh, what? Where's Brendan Fraser? Come on. So Sarah, do you have any kind of like advice for someone who wants to break into your industry? I know you've probably had some obstacles and whatnot. I think we
Mhm.
talked a little bit about that, but like, someone that wants to get into what you're doing, like, what kind of advice would you have for them?
I feel like I feel like I always have that advice of like, don't do it. It's really hard. But no, I mean, I definitely want to see, especially young women of color be encouraged
Mm,
and believe this is something they can do because it is. Um, I think that a lot of it is just you know take the time to focus on your craft, on your work,
mm,
because there's certainly a lot of like I don't know, talk now about, oh, you have to have a brand and you have to have like a million Twitter followers before you even try to get an agent and like all this stuff. And I don't think it actually matters. Like, I feel like maybe this is naive, but I feel like it is still about the quality of the work. And if you write a really good book, um, hopefully someone will eventually pay attention.
Mm.
Again, it's so hard to say that because I know there are like great books out there that get ignored.
Yeah.
And it might take a writer a couple books before they find an agent or they find a publisher. But I think just do it. Just concentrate on your writing. Like, figure out what is the story you want to tell the story only you can tell, because I think that's another thing is a lot of people
Mm.
like try to give this advice about pay attention to the market, look what's selling, blah blah blah, and it's always like nobody the I feel like the quote unquote secret is that nobody actually knows shit about the market. Nobody
That's
knows
right.
what is going to be successful. A lot of times the things that are successful are out of nowhere, and then they spark these like giant trends that end up
Like
taking
Harry
over.
Potter.
But I don't know, just yeah, like Harry Potter was rejected so many times. Or
But then all
like
the followers after that, especially
uh
movie wise,
yeah, and then everybody wants kind of the imitation. But I just concentrate on this a story that you're passionate about telling that you can finish. That's another thing is like finish the book or the article or whatever it is you're writing. Finish it, because then you can, it's easier to fix something that's actually finished than just to sort of keep hammering away at something that you're never going to finish. Um,
I have to totally agree with you there because I know, when we started the podcast, I think I've talked about this before, but I had a lot of like crazy lofty goals that I was just going off in my head, and I had to reel myself in and go like, well, wait a minute, we really need to focus on the content and putting out good product and make
yeah.
sure it's on time, advertise it well on Facebook, just kind of talk about it a little bit, and hopefully over time it'll start growing.
Hmm.
And over the last year, it's been, such a wonderful experience. We've met a lot of nice people like yourself, and and had some really good, solid, stuff that we've talked about in the
Hmm.
past, and a lot of stuff coming up in the future. So I have to agree with you. It's like just put your head down, do the work, and things will start happening eventually. I mean, whether it won't happen tomorrow, but it's going to
Yeah.
happen.
Well,
If you just keep working on it.
you'll at the very least finish something, which I think
Mm.
is positive. Um, and then just I another thing I certainly believe in, and again, like I feel like any writing advice or any career advice, whatever that someone in like a creative industry is giving, it should always be sort of prefaced by if this works for you, because it's just really whatever helps you get the book finished, whatever helps you get to the next goal you want to get to. It's whatever works for you. And I feel like different things work for different people, and I get really annoyed when people try to give this like advice that is supposedly applies to everyone, because I feel like most advice with something like writing doesn't really apply to everyone. um, but also, like, the other thing that certainly has helped me is finding strong communities. Writing can be really lonely. It's just kind of you in your head a lot. And I think that one of the things that I really like benefited from is meeting other writers, meeting other Asian American creatives, and sort of being able to have this feeling like we're in this together. We can celebrate each other's successes, we can commiserate over failures or setbacks, and we can sort of it's sort of, I think, helps productivity to just have people around you who
Mm.
are kind of doing the same thing. So I have my times where I just need to be like by myself, locked away, finishing a book. But for the most part, I really have benefited from finding those communities and feeling like we're doing this crazy, slightly ill-advised profession
The
together.
the writing community that you talk about, is Amy part of that? Where you're kind of just in a coffee shop writing with Amy? Is there?
Well, I have a few. There's sort of like all, some of them cross over. Like there's a
Let's
bunch
name
of them.
drop. Do some name
There,
dropping.
I mean, well, there's like they're like made up of a bunch of different people, but like there's one of them is called the Shamers. It's kind of like a sprawling writing group. It's people who work in all different kinds of writing. TV, TV, books, essays, journalists, and that's a group that will sort of get together in coffee shops and shame each other into writing, and that's super helpful. I'm part of some different kind of Asian American creative collectives, especially of women that really support each other.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like Amy and I are kind of part of a great geek girl community that sort of does not just writing but all different things. And I feel like we support each other as well. So I get a lot of value out of being part of multiple communities and sort of being able to share those experiences with people.
So speaking of writing, you're about to go on another book tour. You kind of already started. I think you were at WonderCon this past
I
weekend.
was at WonderCon, yes.
Internet stalking. I told you. So you have a new book that you're touring about right now, correct?
Well, it's coming
Or
out
it's
in
starting.
coming out in July. It's I believe the release date is actually July 4th, and so it's about a year after the first one, and it's a sequel.
Cool.
It's called Heroine Worship, and it is set in the same world, and it is from the point of view of Aveda Jupiter, who is the best friend slash frenemy from the first book.
Right.
We're kind of going to get a little more of her perspective and how she sees things. And there's a romance again, and it's like a continuation of the story, but from a different POV.
Different point of view.
Hmm.
That's
Awesome.
interesting. That's really interesting to do it that way. I kind of knew what you were on. I just wanted you to plug it yourself better than I could. So I knew it was coming out, but I just wanted you to talk about it more because this is something that we really enjoyed coming from an Asian nerd with a father of two girls. So it was really important for us to get you on the show.
Oh,
Uh,
thanks.
BJ, you got something about the book tour and something else?
Uh, yes. Well, is there? I mean, besides the book, I mean,
Hmm.
do you have anything else that you'd like to plug? I mean, do you have a website? Do you have
Sure.
all that good stuff?
You can always find out what I'm working on at heroinecomplex.com. That's heroin like superheroine, not like drugs. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm also on Twitter. It's just my name, Sarah Kuhn, and it's like I'm usually on there when I'm supposed to be doing something else, like finishing a book. Um, and I have some comics coming out.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm working currently on a little series of Barbie comics. They're like little 50-page graphic novels. The first one is out, the second one is coming out later this year. And those two are about Barbie pursuing her career in fashion. And all the main Barbie is, of course, the Barbie that we all sort of know and are familiar with, but all the supporting characters are what one of my editors called BOC. They're Barbies of color.
Awesome.
So we actually have this character who is Barbie's like fashion idol, like this big designer that Barbie looks up to, and her name is Whitney Yang, and
Nice.
she's like a
Very cool.
cool Asian American girl designer. So that's pretty cool. That's a lot of fun to work on. And then,
Wait, when does Barbie get her superpowers in that?
well,
Does
there's actually another Barbie because this is a new license. I think it started last year, maybe the year before, for the company Paper Cuts, and they sort of like launched this line of Barbie comics. So there's mine, which is it's just called Barbie, and then there's I think it's called Barbie Starlight, which is actually Barbie in space. It's like she's like a space princess. Um, and that one's written by Teenie Howard, and I can't remember who the artist is, but if you look it up, I'm sure it's listed online. The artists on the two books I've done, the first one was Aletha Martinez, who's awesome, and the second one is Yi Shun Lee, who's also awesome and draws super adorable outfits. So yeah, there's like kind of a whole Barbie verse that's being built in
That's
those
cool.
books, and then I'm also working on co-writing with my friend Amber Benson and with art by Siobhan Keenan for Boom Studios. We are writing a Clueless comic book,
Oh
and
wow.
it's
Oh wow, yeah, it's been a while.
it is a continuation. We're not calling it a sequel. It's a continuation of Clueless. It's basically Cher, Dion, and Ty their senior year.
Oh,
Um,
right on.
and I'm not. I think that's coming out later this year. We're still working on it, but that's
I'm
the
I
other.
may check that out.
Yeah, I
That
mean,
sounds kind of cool.
we're like huge, huge Clueless fans, and our editor Shannon Waters is also a huge Clueless fan. So it's been really fun to work on because that's like a movie that you can just watch over and over, and it still holds up. Amy Heckerling is such a brilliant writer.
Oh yeah, she's great. So
That's
you mentioned you said Amber who again?
Amber
Amber
Benson.
Benson? Is that name sounds really familiar?
She is a writer. She's a novelist. She's written several urban fantasy series,
Okay.
and she was also in a show you might have heard of called Buffy the
Buffy.
Vampire Slayer.
Yes,
Yeah,
I met her at a couple of cons.
yeah,
That's why my ears pricked up. I was like, "Wait, Amber Benson, wasn't
yeah.
she Willow's girlfriend? Like, come on."
She's a like she's one of those people who's like good at everything. So she's a
That's so
fabulous
cool.
actor, but she's also a fabulous writer. And if you haven't read her books, she has a couple series. One is called Death's Daughter, and it's about the daughter of the Grim Reaper. It's very funny. And then she has one that the last book is coming out this year. It's called The Witches of Echo Park, and it's about a coven here in Los Angeles, and it's again in that like urban fantasy sort of subgenre. So yeah, that if especially if you liked Heroine Complex, those are two
Yes.
series you would probably enjoy.
Oh,
That's
right on.
this whole entire podcast feels like there's just a lot of like coincidences because I was just reading an article today about her and why is the actress name escaping me? Whoever played Willow.
Oh,
They were
Allison Hannigan.
yeah, that's
Allison
right.
Hannigan, yeah.
They were talking about their relationship in Buffy because the Buffy
Yeah,
anniversary is coming up, and I just read that article today too. And then all
yeah,
of a sudden, you'd name drop her.
yeah. Because they did that 20th anniversary photo shoot
Yeah,
for
Yes.
Entertainment Weekly. Yeah.
that
So that.
spoilers for everybody who has not seen Buffy. I don't know why you're listening to this podcast if you haven't seen it, but spoilers. That death killed me.
Yeah, I
Oh
know.
yeah,
It's
big
like
time.
so It's still one of the like hardest to watch
I
deaths in all of
I
television.
I basically locked it away because I had completely forgotten about it. And then when I read the article today, and then now again when you brought up her name again, I relived that death twice today.
I'm so sorry.
Like rolled a tear. So speaking of writers, I read somewhere or I saw a picture, something like that, a while back, and it got me really excited. But one of our favorite writers and podcasters is Mark Bernardin.
Oh, Mark
Uh,
Bernardin.
love, love, love Mark. I love him on. I mean, we listen to a lot of Kevin Smith podcasts,
Yeah.
but we love listening to Mark because
Yeah.
he has such an insight. He's such a writer's mind.
Yes. I
Um,
love Mark Bernardin. He's another person who I feel so lucky to be friends with. And you know, I guess I can say we're colleagues, writing colleagues, but like because he's another person who I just feel is like good at everything he does. So like he's good at journalism. He's good at like these sort of long form essays. He's good at podcasting. He's good at screenwriting. And he's another person that I feel like I've just learned a lot from because he's so talented. And just I think everything he does is super awesome.
he's writing for a TV show now.
He
I think
is,
it's
yeah,
Stephen King
yeah,
universe. I'm so excited about that because
yeah,
that's such a genius idea.
yeah.
So
It's what
Right
I
on.
can't wait to see the episode that he screenwrites too, because of all of his insights through it. Like, I mean, he did his own take on the Iron Fist. I don't know
Oh,
if you heard it.
yeah. My favorite. I told him
It's
my
amazing.
favorite quote from that was when he says it's a never-ending pasta bullet Olive Garden of not good.
That's right. That was towards the beginning, right?
So fucking
Yeah, because
cool.
he's trying to say like it's not good. It's really not good. It's a never-ending pasta bullet Olive Garden of not good. And I was like, I like that you just went all in with that. Like,
Yeah, that's so great.
Yeah, what's great about his too is he did the same thing we did in our podcast, which was all he did was talk about the issues with the show structurally,
yeah.
character development, all that stuff, and didn't even bother mentioning the controversy stuff till the very end.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. It was a really good. It was a very like thoughtful, very smart
Yes.
story analysis review.
so basically everybody that I've either read about today or things that we like. I wonder what other names we can drop that you're friends with. I was just watching Star Wars too. You know, J.J. Abrams.
No, I don't. I don't think I know. I don't think I know anyone. Super.
I was just trying to
Yeah.
try. Avengers was on today too, and I love Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, I don't know Robert Downey
No,
Jr. Yeah,
okay.
sorry.
So, Sarah, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
We have what we call the big finish. It's three
Okay.
questions. It's the same questions for every interviewer.
Okay.
I'm going to go first. So the first big finish question is all-time favorite character can be from any genre.
Oh my God, that's so hard. Uh, I feel like I would need like years to think about that. Let me think of like who might spring to mind immediately. I mean, I think like you know, like so many ladies in geekdom, my formative character was Princess Leia.
Nice.
And I still think that she's a brilliant character. I mean, she has so much agency. I love that she's so aggressive and
Hmm.
that that she has this romance where she doesn't really have to change that. Like it's actually like Han Solo likes that she's aggressive. Like I
Yeah.
always really like that she was allowed to be in the story that she was allowed to be so sort of take charge and outspoken and bold. And I actually just wrote this piece for the website, the Book Smugglers. They have a thing they put out called the Almanac, which is like some more long form essays and short stories and stuff. And I wrote this piece for them about the book, The Courtship of Princess Leia, which is part of the expanded universe, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is no longer canon.
No.
But it's like about right kind of in between Return of the Jedi and the Thrawn books by Timothy Zahn that were like came out first but were
Five
like
years after.
set later. Yeah,
Yeah.
and like I was trying to think of like why this book made such an impression on me, and I think it's because in that book um Princess Leia is actually allowed to have like sexual desire, like an agency. And she actually says something like she and Han Solo like have this like amazing kiss, and then he's like walking away, and they sort of had this fight earlier about how he thinks she doesn't like anything about him, and so she's like, no, I do like things about you. I like the way your pants fit. And that was like I was like, oh, wow, I forgot that line was like in an officially licensed Star Wars book, but I really dig that it's there. So yeah, I guess like in terms of like formative characters, she would be the one I would pick.
What birthday gift would you get Princess Leia?
Oh, well, I don't know. I feel like she has everything. I mean, maybe like maybe like some fancy barrettes or hairpins so she could like do yet another hairstyle, which I was always impressed that she did those so fast. Like every time there's a scene change she has like a cool different hairstyle, so maybe something like that. I don't know if there's anything I could give her that she doesn't
How
have.
about a bra? Because George Lucas wouldn't let anyone
That's
wear
right.
underwear in
That's right.
space.
Well, I think she won the bra wars later.
Yeah,
It's
she
just
definitely did.
in that first movie it was sort of touch and go.
Okay, so second question. What are you watching now as far as, TV shows? Like something that you must watch live or, or you record it on your DVR, but something that you're really into right now.
I am so behind on everything. I used to be so good at keeping up with television, and now I'm terrible at it. And, I usually don't watch things till they're done or the season's done. But I am really loving Riverdale. That
Oh,
like I
the
was,
Archie universe.
yeah, I was like an Archie fangirl. That and X Men were like my formative comics. And I think what they've done with that mythology is actually super brilliant. It feels very modern. The characters still feel like the characters in the comic book, but with like an update. And I like that the girls in that show are so great. I like that they really focus on Betty and Veronica's friendship, because my favorite comic books were always the ones where they were just allowed to be best friends and they weren't really fighting over Archie. And that's definitely something they've done here. I love Josie and the Pussycats. They are super
Mm.
great. I mean, there is an episode where Josie like lectured Archie on privilege, and I didn't think that was something I would see in like an Archie comic series. So I'm really enjoying it. It's like
Awesome.
really addictive and very smart, and I really like what they've done with it.
See, I haven't watched it, so I was sitting here panicking because I'm like, how am I going to do a follow-up question now? Because she picked something I haven't watched. But okay, so you mentioned Betty and Veronica.
Yeah.
Let's say they had a love triangle with one of the characters on Friends. Who would it be?
Oh God. On Friends. I don't know. Honestly, I always wanted and kind of really want on the show Betty and Veronica to just run off with each other. I feel like that's I mean, that's honestly the pairing that makes the most sense, and I think kind of always
You,
has.
you could have said like Rachel or even
Yeah,
like
well,
Phoebe or something.
well, yeah, but just because they like ladies doesn't mean any lady. Like, I feel like
Right, right.
they would like ladies and would also be deeply into each other.
That's awesome.
I thought everybody was into Rachel.
That's true. I mean, I guess you could use Rachel as the default answer, no matter what that question was, since everybody was in love with Rachel eventually. But you know what? Everybody's in love with Veronica too. That's kind of a thing. So
Oh wow.
And Rachel did have a kiss in college with a woman.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
I watch Friends too much. So here's the last question of the big finish. What are your top 3 movies of all time?
Oh my God. This is another one that is like impossible to answer.
We should get 3 instead of 1.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because there's always like something I'm going to forget. So I'll kind of say what at the moment, because I feel like it changes from moment to moment.
Yeah,
Like I could be
definitely
in a different mood or whatever.
Right.
But I will say right now, Clueless, because I've been watching it so much, and I'm just like appreciating sort of every facet of the brilliance of Clueless. Star Wars, because we've been talking about it, or no, I would say Empire Strikes Back. I was thinking of sort of the whole Star Wars like the trilogy.
Yeah.
But my favorite of those is Empire Strikes Back, and certainly Star Wars is very important to my daily life and many of my friendships. And then I'll say the Heroic Trio, because that is still a presence in the second book, which I just turned in copy edits for. And so that's on my mind too. That's still kind of a touchstone the characters go to. It's something they kind of take a lot out of. So those are 3 movies that are sort of like important to my work, that have been on my mind a lot lately, and that I could probably watch forever.
Those are all great. I'm definitely going to have to catch that last one now because
I mean, okay, here's the thing. I don't like, that's one of those movies where I can really tell you if it's good. Like, I watched it, was such a formative thing when I watched it.
it speaks to you.
It does. Watching it as like a sort of more fully formed adult, there are some things about it that are very weird and don't really make sense. It's one of those movies that it's really about the cool martial arts sequences and the costumes. The story does not totally make sense. Although, I mean, I still have like such a soft spot for it. I don't really care. But I know some people, like a lot of people who read the book and didn't know about the movie before, they're like, oh, I'm going to go watch it. And I don't think it's on Netflix, but for a while it was on Netflix. And then their reaction is either like, oh, that was so good, or why did you make me watch that?
Why?
So I'm just
That's
gonna warn you up front that it might not be to your like actual adult taste,
that's all good.
but
I mean, I had someone go like, "You got to watch Clue. It's amazing." And I'm like, that movie, I did
I
not like
love
that
Clue.
movie.
yeah.
You
I
like Clue?
loved it.
Clue,
Man, I don't like that
Clue,
movie.
I haven't seen in years, but I remember loving it as a kid because it was like the movie that our band teachers showed us when we had like a movie day. You know, when you had like one of those days where the teacher,
Nothing to do with
yeah,
music.
where like the teacher was like, "Oh fuck this, I don't want to like teach you today," or like, "It's almost summer vacation, who cares?" And for some reason, I feel like we always ended up watching Clue. So I did love Clue then. I don't know what my response would be watching it
I
now.
watch it all the time
I
on
love Time
HBO.
Bandits.
It was always on
Oh,
Oh,
HBO.
okay.
Clue was always on HBO, and that's how I
uh
saw it.
huh.
I loved it. I loved Tim Curry in that. It was confusing
Yeah.
why there was 4 endings, but then I read about it
I
later.
Yeah, that is. Well, I mean, I will say it has that iconic moment that I still use a lot, which is Madeline Kahn saying "flames on the side of my face."
Oh yeah,
Flames. I love her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So that would be like we did a guilty pleasure movie early on this or podcast early on this year. So that would definitely be a guilty pleasure movie. I'd
yeah, it
assume.
was.
well, I don't know. I feel like I don't really like it when people say guilty pleasure because I don't think any of you should feel guilty about any of your pleasure. Like I feel if you enjoy something, you just enjoy it. You know, like clearly it's doing something right to make you enjoy it, even if you're like you're sort of critiquing it like, oh, I feel like this writing isn't very good or this plot point is weird or whatever. If you're getting some enjoyment out of it, it's doing something right.
Well, guilty pleasure is also a shorter version of saying, I like this thing. I know I shouldn't like it because I'm so logical when it comes to story and stuff.
Eh. I think even just
She's like, I'm not buying
I think
it.
even just like things. I think a lot of times like we like I mean not to like make it like serious, but I feel like sometimes we also like devalue certain forms of entertainment by saying they're guilty pleasures. You know, I like my book is definitely sort of in the romance genre, and I'm a big romance reader. I love
Hmm.
romance. I think there's so many like wonderful books and wonderful authors in that genre and in the sort of surrounding subgenres, and I will champion it until I'm blue in the face. But there are a lot of people who will consider it, will be like, "Oh, it's a guilty pleasure," and I'm always like, "If it's giving you pleasure, just enjoy it. Don't feel guilty about it." Like clearly, it's
Be happy.
don't use that to sort of devalue that. Like you should champion the things you find pleasure
Well, you kind of turned me around there.
in.
Well, you ruined the theme of our podcasts on that one.
Yeah.
Now we can't use that. We used it
Well, you
once.
can.
All right. Well,
No,
thank you again, Sarah,
we use it.
for showing up and for finally podcasting with us. We normally do a gift face to face. We usually create something or make something that is ridiculous and give it to the person. But obviously, for logistical reasons, we can't do that. But if you check your email, I did send over something right now.
Okay, I will.
Actually, check outside your door. I'm there holding the gift. No, I'm just kidding. I'm staring at your window. No, I'm kidding.
So let me know when you see the email.
Okay. Oh, you want me to open it now?
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay, sorry. I closed my email because I didn't want the
Oh yeah, because it'll go boing,
yeah,
boing every time you get
I didn't want it
yeah.
to make noise, but I'll open it again.
That's okay.
Okay. I see something. Oh, is that me? Very nice.
So
I like it a lot.
I don't know if you've seen our logo, but our logo is me and BJ as stick figures.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of our thing. So we started making
I
stick
see.
figures for all of our
That's great.
guests. So
Thank you.
I hope you like it.
I do.
And I think that's it. We don't really have a formal ending because we have probably another podcast after this one.
Okay.
Sarah, thank you so
Thank
much for your
you.
time. Really appreciate it. We had a great time.
Thank you. Me too.
Excellent. All right. Well, that was Chew on This, a Nerds United podcast. I'm BJ.
Vic.
Until next time, folks, chew on that.
Later.